You know, a lot of things happen when we gather together. We hope you make connections with others. We hope you find something that helps you take a next step towards in your journey of faith. We hope that you find encouragement or assistance. There's a lot of things we hope happen when we gather, but more than anything else what we hope happens when we gather is that Christ gets lifted up and honored, and that's why we come together. That's what we gather for, is that He would be honored. And as we come to this place, no matter what you have going on today, I hope we can set aside just a few moments and lift Him up as we've come into this place. We're continuing our series on Life on Mission, talking about what does it mean if you're a believer, if you're a follower, if you're a Christian. We wouldn't assume all of us are, but if you are, what does that mean as God invites us into this bigger story of His? And we've been looking at some practical steps we take in that, and talking about connecting and serving. This week we're going to talk about sharing. What does that really mean for us, and how do we do that? Last week I was at lunch with a friend of mine. We went to Chili's for lunch, and we got engaged in this huge conversation. We were talking about a lot of stuff, and then we left and went back. I came back to my office. I'm assuming he went back to his. That night, Dinah and I were walking after dinner, and I was telling her about my day. She was telling me about hers, and I mentioned I went to lunch and was telling her about lunch and stories we were sharing at lunch, and then like right there, it hit me. Took my phone out of my pocket, called my friend and said, "Hey, Phil, did you pay when we were at Chili's? Because I didn't." And we both started laughing, and I'm not invited back to Chili's anymore. They have that new pay-as-you-go thing, right? I love that. It sits on the table, you swipe your card, and so we were going to do that, but we got caught up in conversation, and the conversation was important. It was a big deal, but we missed that one small detail, and that was paying the bill. So fortunately, we did get to go back and rectify that, so I'm now welcome again at Chili's. In fact, I'll see you there at lunch. If anybody wants to pay as you go, by my table. You know, that some stories are important, and as we read a story, sometimes we miss a bigger thing that's happening. And I think that's in the story we're looking at today. Luke read it for us out of the Gospel of Luke chapter 5. I want to look at it from one of the other Gospel writers, Mark chapter 2. If you have your Bibles, I want to invite you to turn there. It's a great story. I love this story that we find in Scripture. Now, you remember the Gospel writers, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, are telling us Jesus' story. They're unpacking Jesus' story for us. And they're recording with God's promptings the things that to them seem to be a big deal. And two of the four Gospel writers tell us about this incident that happens. We're going to look at Mark chapter 2. I'm going to just start in verse 1 for us. A few days later, when Jesus again entered Capernaum, the people heard that he had come home. Now, Capernaum is this city that sits on a hillside looking down the valley along the Sea of Galilee. So it's a seaside kind of city. And when we've been there with groups from the church, it's one of those gorgeous spots. It is just beautiful. As you look down that valley and out across the Sea of Galilee, it's a spectacular location set up high on this hill. And we know this now, that Capernaum was also the place where Jesus kind of based out of it, so it got referred to often as his home. That's what Mark tells us here. The people knew he had come home. And so many gathered that there was no room left, not even outside the door, and he preached the word to them. Now, here's what we do know is going on in Jesus' ministry at this point is his popularity is soaring. People are showing up to hear him, to see him. There have been some amazing things that have been going on through that Judean valley and into Jerusalem and along some of the smaller cities in Galilee. And now here he is back in Capernaum, and the people showed up. And it's Luke who fills in a detail for us. Luke tells us it wasn't just the people in the city of Capernaum that had showed up, but they were coming from all those little seaside cities, in fact, from Judea and Jerusalem themselves. And we also know this, that it was a lot of the religious leaders who were coming, because they were not only being challenged by Jesus, but now they were beginning to challenge who he was, starting to question what he was doing and why he was doing what he was doing. Let's pick it up down in verse 3. Some men came, bringing to him a paralytic carried by four of them. The small little detail that we get in this story, there's a man, we don't get his name neither Mark or Luke tell us any details about him. We don't know if he's from Capernaum. We don't know, has he been crippled like this since a child? Has he had this disability maybe later in life? Maybe there was an accident, some disease that occurred. We don't really know. We get no details about him at all, except that 4 of his friends bring him to this house where Jesus is now teaching. Now, sometimes when you and I read the Bible, we read right through the story, don't we? I mean, we miss kind of the backstory. We miss some of the color of the story. I wonder how this happened. I wonder what was it that got this guy and his friends to show up. Maybe they were gathered together the night before, watching football on TV and having pizza and stuff. And one of the friends said, "Hey, I heard Jesus is in the city, and here's what we've been hearing about him. He's been doing these amazing things. And so we're going to take you down there tomorrow because who knows what he might do for you." Maybe that's what happened. Maybe this guy, maybe he'd heard. Maybe he went to his friends and he said, "Hey, I need you to help me out. I want to go meet this Jesus." Maybe it was early in the morning and one of the friends went and rousted out the other guys and came and they just knocked on his door and said, "Dude, you're going. We're taking you." We don't really get the story, but can you imagine what it was like for this guy? Because certainly he'd heard the stories about Jesus. And those stories have been some amazing things happening. Some people were being healed. There was this phenomenal teaching about a relationship with God that you could have. So here he is on this stretcher. He's on a mat, and that mat would have been what he would have been on the roadside, because unfortunately in this day and age of Jesus' time, people with disabilities had very limited opportunities. Their primary income was often to beg or rely on family members. Their social strata was deemed fairly low, actually, unfortunately. There really wasn't much option except to be at the whim and will of what others would do for you. And so here they are bringing him on his mat. And that mat would have been what he slept on. That mat would have been what he would have sat along the roadside on. That mat would have been used also as a stretcher, because we know that more than likely the mat had 4 rings on the corner, and they would stick rods through those rings so that friends could move him from place to place. And so here he is that morning, and maybe he knew they were going to take him. Maybe he'd asked. Can you imagine that kind of mixed emotion he might have had? Excitement, but wondering, well, maybe I'll get to meet him and maybe something will happen, or maybe he's just another scam artist who sets up a big tent and promises a lot of stuff he can't deliver on, and maybe I won't even, maybe he won't do anything for me. Who knows? And I wonder what it was like as they were coming in toward where Jesus was, and then they get there, and here's what happens. There's a huge crowd. They could not get him to Jesus because of the crowd. This wasn't the only guy and his friends who wanted to come and see Jesus. Now, we don't really know, but historians are guessing that since this was Peter's hometown, Capernaum, it was more likely than not that they might have actually been in Peter's house when they were meeting. And those homes weren't very big. If you've seen the structures, they were limited in size, and so the crowd filled the house, and then it overflowed out into the streets, and you get the impression here that it might have been all around, actually for blocks. And so his friends, beaming with excitement that they're going to get to meet Jesus, get stopped in this crowd. And if you've ever been in a crowd before where you realize, I'm not even going to get close to the front of this thing. Now there's disappointment. Here's what his friends do. I love this part of the story. And since they could not get to him to Jesus because of the crowd, they made an opening in the roof above Jesus, and after digging through it, they lowered the mat the paralyzed man was lying on. I don't know what your circle of friends are like, but if you're like most people, you have some friends who are very safe, right? They're the play it right down the middle of the fairway. They don't ever really want to take much chance. And then there's the friends who are even less risk-taking than that. I mean, whatever is safe, they're way on this side of safe. But almost every group, it seems like, especially when you're younger, has a friend who lives way out, like way over, like out here, right? Going, hey, we should try this. And somehow that friend seems to exercise enough influence that generally police are called and things like that happen, right? And so maybe one of these guys says, whoa, hey, we're not done here yet. And he takes a back alley and comes up and sneaks behind the house, because in a typical Palestinian house at this time, they would have had a flat roof. And here's how that roof would have been built. There would have been timbers along the edge of the walls, and they would have laid branches across that, and then they would have put palm leaves or fig leaves on top, and then they would have brought up buckets of mud and slopped it on there, and then as it began to harden, they would roll it out with a heavy stone so it would form this thick tile. And it often became another sleeping place, or maybe where they would have meals when the weather cooperated. So his friends head up to the roof. And maybe they were thinking, we'll wait up here. And when he comes out of the house, we'll yell for him. Or maybe they were thinking, at the end of every kind of church gathering, there's like some chicken buffet thing. Maybe they'll bring it up here and we'll just hang out and wait for him to show. But I'm guessing that same friend, the one that goes way over there, started kind of digging around with his finger. And he got like a little axe, started chipping around down there. And then he got a hole, and the other friends get in. They start digging this hole, and pretty soon there's a hole big enough. They pull the rods out of the mat, and we don't know if they grabbed him by the rings and lowered him down, as far as they could, and then like, hey, you're on your own, Charlie, and let him go. We don't really. Or maybe it was ropes. We're not sure. Now, imagine now. Let's back up. You're in a house. Jesus is teaching. Religious leaders are there. They're ones with the robes and stuff on. The crowd's there. Peter and his wife are there, kind of fussing about how many people are in the house and how we're going to feed all these people. You know what it must have been like for her. Peter, you didn't tell me you're bringing all these people to our house tonight. And then they hear something up on the roof, and then there's like dust starting to fall, and then chips of stuff, and then like here comes some dude through the hole. If you're the guy on the mat, this is a bit out of your ability to control at this moment, isn't it? And I wonder what he's thinking. Am I going to get yelled at? Is he going to condemn me? Are they going to chase me? And look what happens. When Jesus saw their faith, he said to the paralytic, "Son, your sins are forgiven." He didn't ask his name. He didn't grill him. He didn't say, so tell me about this journey you've been on trying to get here to see me. When he saw their faith, I find it interesting because the Greek carries that phrase. This collective faith. It was his faith and the faith of who? Those four friends up on the roof who helped him get there. When he saw the simplicity that all they were trying to do was get their friend to Jesus, when he saw this guy's earnest faith, he said to him, "Your sins are forgiven." That's not what he came for, is it? He didn't come for that. As far as he knew, he was hoping to make a request. I'd love to be able to walk. Now here's an important part of the story that might fill some of that in for us. In that day, first century, the belief was this: if you had any kind of disability at all, any kind of physical infirmity or emotional instability, the reason you had that was because either your parents had sinned, or your grandparents had sinned, or you had sinned. It had to be the result of something. It must have been the result of your sin. Or, and if not yours, your dad's or your grandmother's. The prevailing teaching for centuries before this, mostly oral tradition, was that you had done something to offend God, and God therefore saw it fit to mark you somehow. You were a sinner. And there's two things Jesus is doing when he says this here. The first is he's establishing his authority, his relationship with God the Father. And we're going to see that unfold after this event and in some big ways if you read through the gospel. And he is saying, all of us are marked by sin. All of us are paralyzed by something. All of us come in need. And the healing we really need has nothing to do with whatever disability we're bringing to the table. It has to do with the hole in our heart, the rip in our soul. And that is what Jesus had come to resolve and to fix. It wasn't so that blind people would see and lame people would walk. In fact, oftentimes Jesus would come into a village and they would be lined up on the streets, and he didn't heal everybody, because his healing was further and deeper. And remember who's there? Those religious leaders, the ones with the corner market on God, the ones who are supposed to have this love God, love your neighbor thing down, the ones who are supposed to be helping people connect with God, the ones who actually were erecting barriers between people and God. Verse 6 says it like this: Now some teachers of the law were sitting there, and they were thinking to themselves, why does this guy talk like that? He's blaspheming. Who can forgive sins but God alone? And I love when Jesus does this, when we read the scriptures. He responds to their thoughts. I mean, they're thinking, man, this dude's like going way out of bounds. And immediately Jesus knew in his spirit that this was what they were thinking in their hearts. And he said to them, why are you thinking these things? Which is easier to say to the paralytic, your sins are forgiven, or to say, get up, take your mat, and walk? But that you may know, catch that, but that you may know that the Son of Man has authority on earth to forgive sins, he said to the paralytic, I tell you, get up, take your mat, and go home. Two things happening. Jesus, and if you flip forward, both in Mark and Luke, and you get all the way to the end of their stories, here's what they tell us. That Jesus had come to settle once and for all our way to connect to God. He had come to the cross, and he'd taken on our sin and shame and guilt and paralysis and all the stuff about us. And he forgives us of that when we come to the cross. He had come as God's Son, holy and blameless, to reconcile us back to God. And that's what he does with this man. He fixes the hole in his heart. And he says, and just so you know that that's a bigger deal than actually helping him walk, I'm going to help him walk as well. And he says to this guy, take up your mat and head on home. Now, can you imagine if you're that guy? First of all, you got caught in the middle of a theological debate. You're in a room you didn't even plan on being in. You got there in a way you certainly didn't plan on showing up, and you're the center of attention. And now he's saying to you who have been unable to walk, walk. I wonder what that first step was like. I wonder as he put weight on those legs. I wonder as he stood in the room. I mean, can you imagine? Just picture what was going on. Look at the look on his face. Pharisees, they're still bothered about Jesus pointing people to God. He starts walking out of the room. He picks up his mat. What had carried him, he was now carrying. And he leaves the house. And I'm guessing that the people outside the house were the ones who actually got this idea that, hey, we need God. Not that God needs us. And I bet they were excited for him. I'm guessing they were high-fiving him. I bet they started singing. I bet this dude started dancing down the road. I bet you could hear people chanting, lame man walking. I mean, it was like, there's this party going on. Look what the scripture says. And they were amazed. We've never seen anything like this. What had they not seen before? Because there'd been healings before. They'd never seen anybody fix the hole in the heart like Jesus just did. I love this story. I love this story because it tells us a bunch of things. It tells us that we're great at establishing a lot of rules and regulations that keep us away from God. And And that the people least likely to come are the ones who often seem most invited by God. I love that part. So I love that Jesus begins to establish his authority here, and it unfolds in the rest of what we find in Mark and Luke. But you know what I really love about this story? To me, this is kind of the forgot to pay part of the story. Important, necessary, overlooked though. There were 4 friends that all they wanted to do was get their friend to Jesus. We don't know, did they have their theology right? We don't know, did they know the Torah? We don't know, did they do their bar mitzvah well? We don't know any of that about them. What we know is this, is they knew their friend had a need, and they thought Jesus might be able to do something about it, and what they could do was get their friend there. They couldn't do anything past that. I love that there were some friends who scraped their knuckles and busted their knees, who didn't take no for an answer, who found a way to get their friend to meet Jesus. I was at a gathering recently, and I just felt trapped, actually. It was a bunch of pastors that were gathered together, and there was a ministry that's wanting to move to Colorado, feeling called to bring their work here. I'm always amazed by how people are called to Colorado, never called to Wyoming. And in the middle of their pitch, their presentation, I had it was one of those deals where I was thinking, oh man, I wish I had been busy. And they said, our ministry last year helped save 1,000 people. Really? Because you know how many people LifeBridge has saved? You know how many? I've been here 23 years. Church has been here 123 years. You know how many we've saved? Bupkis! 0! Because we don't do that. Only God does that. Only Jesus saves. Only he can fix the hole in my heart. Only he can call me from death to life. What we get to do is what these 4 guys did. We can carry the stretcher for somebody. We can knock a hole through the roof. We can introduce them to the one that can heal them. This past year, our staff for devotions on Tuesdays, we gather for devotions Tuesday morning and before work begins. And all year since January, we've been, various staff members have just been telling their story. It's been fun. It's been interesting. We all have different stories, different things about us, right? And it's just been fun to listen. And all of those include, how is it you came to know Christ? And we all come in a lot of different ways. I'm grateful for the people who carried the stretcher for me, who busted through the hole in the roof. There's a friend who first invited me to go to a high school retreat, and it was a youth coach, actually, who sat and listened to my obnoxious questions about, is there really a God who cares? And it was a pastor who was patient with me. It was a lot of people. It was some neighbors who were just good neighbors. Grace changed my life and ended up healing our family and changing our lives in so many ways. Because you didn't get here on your own if you're a follower. Somebody helped you find Jesus. Terry Owens on our staff, she's part-time staff member. She's been a long-time volunteer, youth coach, middle school coach, cares about those middle school girls particularly. And she's got a great story. I want you to listen to her story. Terry's story is online. It's actually a longer story, a fuller version. Love for you to catch it there. You know, we all get there because somebody else helped us, however they did. Somebody helped you. So the obvious question is, so who are you carrying a stretcher for? Who are you inviting to join you here in a worship service? Who are you praying for? Who are you finding an opportunity to share what God has done in your life with? Who are you busting your knees and scraping your knuckles for? Because you just want them to meet Jesus. We all come to Christ with different issues, don't we? But the same need for the hole in our heart to get fixed. Who are you carrying a stretcher for?